and welcome back to an invisible and invisible illness awareness project. This week I wanted to begin a series talking about different types of treatments that I've tried to improve my conditions. First of all, I'd like to focus on something called quercetin. Quercetin I first heard about from a couch surfer who was staying with me years ago, actually. He basically described it to me as something that would help with my allergies and said that basically I could just take it for a little while and then my allergies would diminish to the point where I could stop taking it so that I wouldn't be dependent on it. So at the time this was my last year in university, so I was like about 22. I think I still had acne at the time. My nose was always stuffy. At one point I started having this pain in my wrist where I would always have to like stretch it out in a way that would cause it to pop in order to be able to move it freely. And I would have this feeling in my ears, a muffled feeling. It was like, sort of like my hearing was muffled. I started taking quercetin. All of that got better. My acne cleared up. I didn't constantly have a stuffy nose. My elbow felt better. My hearing was clear. It was great. And I also really never seemed to get a cold after that. But the thing is, if I ever ran out of quercetin, I thought, oh, this is a good opportunity for me to not take it for a while I'm waiting on a refill so that I'm not dependent on it and my body sort of has that experience every now and then of not taking it. And at that point I would be miserable. Like it would be like I have a cold but like instantly turned up on high. Like my nose is running constantly, like I just have to keep a tissue stuffed in my nostrils and just so completely miserable, so that I really felt like I couldn't stop taking it. And at one point I looked it up on WebMD and it says this is sort of like a supplement. You can find it in certain fruits, but there's nothing proving that it's actually effective. And I'm like, okay, well, it's definitely effective for me. And then once I got to the point where I realized that something was a bit off health-wise and that all of these symptoms I was experiencing weren't normal, I first came across histamine intolerance and joined these forums and saw that a lot of people who suffer from histamine intolerance were taking this stuff and they absolutely depended upon it to have a somewhat normal life. They just couldn't live without this stuff. And then I learned that quercetin is actually a mast cell stabilizer, which is really interesting because when you take antihistamines, that means the histamine has already been released into your body and the antihistamines block the receptors from soaking the histamine up, which means they have nowhere to go. They're just kind of stuck floating around somewhere. That I found really interesting because at the point where I was really sick and I tried taking antihistamines, they would make me really anxious. But if you know anything about histamine receptors, there's H1, which is any sort of sinus congestion. H2 is when you have any sort of upset stomach, GI issues. H4 is in your bones, and H3 is a neuroreceptor. So my theory is that if I was taking an H1 or an H2 blocker, that the histamine couldn't go where it wanted to, so instead went to my brain and caused anxiety. But then mast cell stabilizers like quercetin work the other way around. They stop the mast cells from releasing histamine and other amines in the first place, which means that you don't have them just floating around freely. You don't have them released at all. It just calms your mast cells down so that you don't have all of these symptoms, which really makes a lot more sense. Instead of treating the symptoms, treat the cause of the problem. So interestingly enough, I was taking quercetin for several years before I got to be really sick, But since my health declined, I realized that I could stop taking it and I no longer noticed any difference. That's probably because I ended up going on a low histamine diet. So I was eliminating histamine on that front, and the quercetin just wasn't as necessary anymore. So at this point, I don't take it anymore, but I know that it's vitally important to a lot of people with histamine intolerance and mast cell disorders, and I would still definitely recommend giving it a try if you haven't yet. It is a great natural mast cell stabilizer that anybody can just order online, which is especially great if you don't tolerate pharmaceuticals very well, or you have a really long wait to get in to see a mast cell specialist who can prescribe you those type of medications. I have also tried a chemical mast cell stabilizer, which I also want to talk about, but I will leave that until next week, and I'll see you guys then. So, full disclosure, actually there are a lot of things that I've tried that should have helped and didn't. So that could be part of why it just stopped working, like maybe just as a part of getting sicker. I've also tried taking it again and don't tolerate it anymore. But that doesn't change the fact that it's still great if you do tolerate it. If you haven't tried it, it's worth trying. As always, if you've tried quercetin yourself, please share your experience in the comments. I'm sure there will be people watching this video who haven't tried it and would love to see as many points of view as possible. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you like the channel, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're really feeling it, you can even become a patron on Patreon or donate to my GoFundMe, which I would definitely really appreciate. And I will see you guys next week.